is Amy Jo Muscat. And Pam, you can go to the first title slide, okay? So we can get started. I do want to welcome everyone to our third Lunch Connections. This is our attempt to really reach out and let people know throughout the community about what we do here at Bridges and the kind of educational topics that we can bring to you or your organization. So I'm Amy Jo Muscat, and I'm the Education Coordinator at Bridges, Domestic and Sexual Violence Support in Nashua. I'd like to welcome you to our third Lunch Connections, but before we begin, I just want to remind you that we will be recording this presentation. You will be muted, and I will only be visible during the introduction and at the end for our debriefing session. Please, I encourage you to engage with us by adding your thoughts and questions in the Q&A and chat, which will be monitored by my colleagues. They will answer your questions and integrate into our final conversation. The more that we reflect together, the more dynamic our experience will be today. There are many factors that lead us to resist proactive engagement when we witness or face an emergency. Over the next hour, we will have an opportunity to reflect on our assumptions, barriers, and the cultures that surround us. In addition, we will discuss several strategies that can be safe ways to address concerning behaviors in public venues and in our relationships. So I'm going to now fade. You'll hear my voice, but you will not see my face. Okay. So let's start by talking about what it means to be a bystander and how we can become more engaged and proactive when witnessing a dangerous situation. We each have life experiences that can become personal barriers, and we hope to reflect on them. There are myths in our culture that lead to imbalances in power and control and are often reflected in our relationships. In addition, there are many ways that our cultural environments and community assumptions combined impact our responses to violence, relationship violence, the spectrum of sexual violence, and stalking. Behaviors including stalking and other means of imposing power are often precursors to greater violence. It is always important to address safety, particularly in an instance where there could be something dangerous. Assessing safety, interpreting the context of a particular situation can be challenging, but it's always important to assess that safety before considering different ways to possibly intervene. Go ahead. Thank you, Pam. All right, so let's continue the exploration and let's dig a little bit deeper. Okay, as we dig deeper, we will describe sexual violence as a continuum. This can be a starting point and a basis to shift attitudes, as well as dispel commonly held myths that contribute to a culture that is often apathetic and condones concerning behavior. We hope to introduce you to tools that can nurture bystander engagement and support healing of those who have been targeted by others. Although we will be focusing on gender-based violence, these strategies can be utilized in all concerning behavior that entails imbalances of power and control, as well as those that impact safety and personal freedom. But before we continue, I just want to define intimate partner violence and gender-based violence. Intimate-based violence, sometimes known as IPV, is a serious preventable public health problem that affects millions of Americans. The term intimate partner violence describes physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, financial control, or psychological harm by a current or former partner or spouse. Intimate partner violence is abuse or aggression that occurs in a close relationship. Intimate partner refers to both current and former spouses and dating partners. IPV can vary on how it often happens, its severity, and it can range from one episode of violence, and it can also be chronic or be repetitive over multiple years. And again, IPV can include physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, financial control, and psychological aggression. Several types of intimate partner violence can occur together. Intimate partner violence is connected to other forms of violence and causes serious health issues and economic consequences, often addressed by a public health approach, which identifies risk factors and protective factors for multiple types of violence. So I do want you to be thinking about intimate partner violence today. Gender-based violence is violence that is directed at an individual based on his or her biological sex or gender identity. It includes physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse, threats, coercion, and economic or educational deprivation, whether occurring in public or in private life. So what is a bystander? A bystander has traditionally been referred to as someone who witnesses something but does not take action or may experience harm as part of witnessing an event, i.e. an innocent bystander. Bystanders have not been regarded as individuals with much power and agency. They often are merely in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this is an individual who may have an opportunity to provide assistance, but does nothing to intervene. Someone simply standing by. An engaged bystander is someone who intervenes before, during, or after an incident because they understand that a situation could be harmful and potentially dangerous. Let me give you an example. While hanging out with a group of friends, you may express disagreement or disappointment in a friend who makes an inappropriate sexual comment or tells a joke that describes victim blaming. You decide to challenge your friend. This challenge creates an interruption and can help create also a safer environment by changing norms and group expectations. Engaged bystanders assume responsibility and take action in a number of ways. The more we can counter the forces that accept inaction, the more we can promote a cultural shift towards safe and effective action. But now I have a question for you, and this is where I really would love you to share your thoughts in the chat. Why do people stand by and potentially and witness potentially harmful situations without intervening? Could you change the slide? Oh, not quite yet. Okay. So can you share in the chat, why do you think people do not intervene? Okay, awesome. Afraid, fear, absolutely. Not sure not sure what to do. Absolutely. They don't feel it's any of their business. They're worried they'll be alone and no one will have their back. These are all really, really great. Absolutely. Default setting to passive entertainment, feeling helpless in general. Carlotta, I really like that. Makes things worse. They don't think that it's in their place and they have no support. These are all really, really great things. What awesome responses and examples. So I'd like to add a few others, even though you probably could respond yourself to a lot of these. But I want you to think about some other perspectives that involve each of us personally. All of us, every single person on this call today, carry our histories and experiences with us. This includes exposure to traumatic events, which impact our interactions with the world, as well as how we navigate our relationships. If someone has been impacted by sexual or relationship violence, this may be a large component of their personal history, possibly their self-esteem and their ability to connect with others. This might change their perspective, make it more difficult for them to believe in themselves, trust their perceptions, and or advocate for themselves or others. Many people who have experienced trauma have additional challenges in reading and responding to concerning situations. They might become hyper-focused on one component of a situation. They might revert to a fight, flight, or freeze mode, a psychological reaction that occurs in response to a perceived attack or threat to survival. Many individuals who have experienced trauma, whether sexual violence, relationship violence, complex or chronic violence, or have been disempowered, can develop post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a psychiatric disorder that can occur in people who have experienced or witnessed a traumatic event, such as a natural disaster, a serious accident, a terrorist act, war, combat, sexual assault, or another violent personal assault. Linda Douglas, trauma specialist at the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, and someone I consider a guru extraordinaire, describes a goldfish that grows up in a bowl filled with several piranha. The goldfish learns vigilance, caution, and care. They are always on the lookout for danger, and they are ready to react in a fight, flight, or freeze mode. So much of their energy is swallowed up by their need to stay safe. One day, the young goldfish maintains their vigilance and is moved into a goldfish bowl with many other friendly goldfish. But the young goldfish maintains their vigilance and continues to assume that they are surrounded by danger. Hence, our goldfish in the fishbowl. Individuals with PTSD are like our little goldfish friend. They have many remnants of their traumatic experiences, which can run or short circuit their rational brain and brings them into the survival brain, the fight, flight, or freeze mode. There are skills and resources that they have, but might not be accessible to them. Go ahead. Some of the consequences of this type of history include a multitude of personal barriers which impact boundaries and can result in fear, disrupted relationships, as well as someone's ability to interpret a situation and respond with clarity, empowerment, and self-advocacy. And a lot of these consequences are the kinds of things that you actually described when we were talking earlier, whether it be fear or helplessness or self-blame. They're all a lot of the things that often can get in the way of people helping another person or responding in a dangerous situation. Becoming aware of our own barriers and the potential impact on our behavior is a really important step. Go ahead. So let's talk for a minute about the bystander effect. The bystander effect is a collective assumption that another witness in a vicinity will take action. Nothing happens because most of the group is assuming that someone else will take responsibility. A lot of work was done in after the sexual assault and murder of Kitty Genovese in New York City, to research the bystander effect. And the New York Times actually reported on this when it first happened, questioning why so many people didn't respond, despite the fact that so many individuals either saw or heard the attack, that little was done to assist Kitty Genovese in her moment of need. She died as a result. This became a national story, and prompted social scientists to start researching the bystander phenomenon. How could so many be aware of a brutal crime and do nothing to address it? Later on, the New York Times came forward to basically say that their description of the event had been exaggerated. And in fact, out of the 38 people who heard the attack, 2 actually did come forward to Kitty Genevieve's rescue, including one neighbor who climbed out of their window to use a neighbor's phone. So I just want you to understand that even though many people did nothing, for many of the reasons that you put in the chat earlier, that there were people that came to help Kitty Genevieve. Okay, go ahead. So let's just watch this really quick video that describes the bystander effect. It is rather old, but I'm hoping that we'll have some information to discuss after it's done. Need some volume. Okay, hold on a minute. Stop it for a minute, Pam. I need some volume on this, okay? How about on your computer? I don't know.
Psychology research suggests that often a victim is less likely to receive assistance when surrounded by a group rather than a single bystander. When people are in a crowd, it's easier to pass the buck. It's what psychologists call the diffusion of responsibility. Liverpool Street Station in London, a busy thoroughfare for commuters. Unknown to these passers-by, Peter is an actor. As part of an experiment on bystander apathy, he's pretending to be ill.
Help! Help!
How long before he gets help?
Please, somebody. Help. Help me, please help me.
Helping would be inconvenient or even risky. He lies there for more than 20 minutes and no one raises an eyebrow.
Please, somebody help me.
It's always very distressing to watch situations like this where people are obviously suffering and no one's actually helping them. But what we have here is 2 conflicting rules. One is the rule that we ought to help, and the other is the rule that we ought to do what everybody else is doing. And here you have effectively a group of strangers who are exerting the pressure not to intervene, not to help, and it's very difficult to rebel.
Ruth, another actor, takes Peter's place. How long before she receives help? Minutes later, and 34 people have passed without stopping.
Well, people don't really want to know. They just haven't got the time. Well, they have got the time, they just don't want to get involved.
Unwittingly, these strangers have silently formed a temporary group with a rule: don't get involved. They're afraid to stand out from the crowd and won't take action if no one else does. This woman has clearly spotted Ruth, but she conforms to the rule and does nothing. Watch what happens, though, when someone else helps.
You all right? You all right?
Yes, thank you.
Sure, you look a bit clicky, you know what I mean?
She suddenly finds herself in a different group with a new rule: to help.
You want to sit up? You all right? Yeah. What's wrong?
First I thought she was dead. Then I sort of checked to see if she was breathing or not. And I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one had noticed her, because there was a bloke sat there just absorbed in reading a newspaper.
This time, Peter's dressed as a respectable gentleman. Now that his dress is in keeping with those around him, how long before he's rescued?
Hello, sir. How are you
I'm all right.
6 seconds. She even calls him sir, and suddenly
I'm
everyone's a good Samaritan.
Do you suffer from epilepsy?
No.
While you're lying on the floor in the rain?
Because he's part of the right group, everyone wants to help.
I would just hate to be in his position of feeling ill and nobody helping and walking past, so we'd just like to check that he was okay.
And I thought, well, it's wet, so he must really be ill because he's going to ruin his suit anyway.
So even though that's a very, very old, it was actually 2009 that was made. It's very interesting that in different situations, when people have different, when they present differently, that people respond differently, right? And so I just think that it's an illustration of that diffusion of responsibility that was researched early on with Kitty Genovese. Go ahead.
Plays like this.
Awesome. Okay. So let's talk for a minute about some of the other challenges there have been when challenging the bystander effect. Okay. So if we start with the premise that the bystander effect is a social psychological phenomenon in which one individual feels discouraged from helping a victim if there are others nearby, which brings about the diffusion of responsibility, just like in the Kitty Genovese case. But what's happened in more recent years is that the bystander effect has been challenged. Although there have been several ways to view the action or apathy of a witness, the recent challenge spotlights the complexity of bystander behavior. In this new research, when bystanders were viewed 200 videos of real-life altercations, at least one person intervened 91% of the time. The more people, the more possibility that someone would intervene. In other words, having an audience communicated safety and encouraged heroism. In reality, when faced with an emergency situation, most people will at least attempt to help those in need. Go ahead. Okay. So, have you ever been in a challenging situation? Did you intervene? If not, why? And what got in your way? Take a minute and tell us in the chat the things that got in your way when you were in a challenging or possibly dangerous situation. What are some of the things that got in your way? Absolutely. So afraid that the violence would be turned in on me. Yep. Yep, absolutely. Afraid that it was going to escalate. The person was unpredictable, fear of violence, thought I might make the situation worse. Absolutely. All of these are really, really awesome, awesome perspectives. But I do want to add a few more. I want you to think that maybe some of the things that could get in the way are fear, but also that you'd make things worse. Maybe there's a piece of you that feels kind of apathetic. Maybe you've had past trauma and you're afraid because you don't want to be pulled into a situation that is too escalated for you to navigate. Maybe because you think about victim blaming and it's something that you see a lot. My husband warning me that it would make things worse for the victim and I did not want to add to that towards my children or us. Yep, absolutely. So a lot of times people do that because they think that they're going to make the situation worse, which could happen. But part of what I'm inviting you to think about is that we really all could benefit from having skills to help escalate a situation. Let's see, Tracy says, I've also had experiences where I find myself thinking maybe I'm overreacting, right? Or you question yourself. Absolutely. So I do want you to think about that. Also, many times bystanders do think of themselves as less powerful as they are. So that may be something that plays into it. But most of all, having the skills to stay calm and to de-escalate a situation is something that really could be very, very helpful. As a mandated reporter, it's difficult to help a victim understand why I need to file, and that it's for the protection of the child and not judgment on them as a victim. Absolutely. And we run into a lot of that when we deal with clients here at Bridges. But we also try to understand that that report is to give them support and to possibly and hopefully get them the help that they need. But absolutely, all of these are really, really great insights. All right. So let's go ahead. You're going to see a couple of other things fly in on this slide. Thank you, Pam. Yep, in a challenging situation, we did that. Awesome. And awesome and awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to explore the roots of cultural and sexual violence. Sexual violence is a broad term and includes sexual assault, incest, child sexual abuse, intimate partner violence, sexual exploitation, human trafficking, unwanted sexual contact, sexual harassment, exposure, and voyeurism. Obviously, these behaviors range in their intensity and in their frequency. As we explore this as a spectrum, we will try to identify the correlation between the intensity of the behaviors and how we respond. It's really important to think about our cultural context and how we were taught messages in terms of gender roles, expectations, and power. We also can be more tuned into the subtle messages that surround us, what we observe and what we notice. And obviously, the subtler the message, the harder it is sometimes to pick up that information. Where we have learned about power and agency and stereotypes and cultural assumptions. Where did you get that information? Where did you learn about power and agency and stereotypes and cultural assumptions? All right. So next we have a video, and this video again is just to spur your thinking in terms of the messages that we do receive in our culture. So take a peek at this and then share your thoughts or responses to this information. Okay, so do you have any responses to that? Where are those messages? Where did they come from? Are those messages that we still see and hear around us? What are some of your thoughts? So you're absolutely right. There are constant media images and stereotypes, and there is still victim blaming, right? That is something that was showcased a lot in terms of this. So Femina says, man up to a message. A lot of boys and men adds to toxic masculinity and the notion to be tough and strong and that being emotional is not manly or masculine. Absolutely. These messages are all around us growing up. So we need to find a way to learn these to unlearn these harmful messages and to prevent messages we learn at home, in school, from peers, in literature, music, ads. It's everywhere. It's all around us. Some of it is subtle though, and it's hard for us to notice because it's all around us. And I'm inviting you to just keep noticing and keep thinking, okay? All right, so let's go to the next slide. Thank you so much for your responses on that one. Nope, let's go the other way. Okay, so I do want to talk for a minute about the spectrum of violence. Okay, nope. Okay, the spectrum of violence, because there are stereotypes and there are cultural changes. And there are all of these different behaviors, all of these different attitudes that contribute to the culture that really fosters a lot of violence. So catcalling, rape jokes, unwanted non-sexual touch and sexual harassment, groping, threats, victim blaming, shaming, stalking, right? All of these are behaviors. But the first question that I want you to do is to review the behaviors listed on the left-hand side and where do they fall? I invite you to think about the intensity of these behaviors and how you might safely respond to them in a more private or in a public situation. The spectrum of violence is pervasive and insidious. Think about the behaviors listed on the left and what would you consider to be a low-level behavior? Could you put that in the chat? What would you consider to be a low-level behavior? Catcalling, absolutely. Rape jokes, banter, absolutely. These are all lower-level behaviors. Absolutely. And so these are the things that kind of flood and are part of a lot of our interactions, a lot of things that we see around us every day, okay? They're low-level behaviors that are normalized. And absolutely, Tracy, what you said, that some things we just kind of accept because they're everywhere. But again, lower-level behaviors can lead to higher level behaviors. And you're absolutely right that catcalling is also degradation, absolutely. So if I were to ask you what some of the medium level behaviors were, and Laura, you might say that that's catcalling, what would be some of the medium level behaviors? Can you put that in the chat? Locker room banter, sexist attitudes, absolutely. Stalking, absolutely. Unwanted non-sexual touch, sexual harassment, asking someone on a date repeatedly when they've said no, for example, absolutely. Okay, and again, there may be some differences in terms of how you see some of these behaviors, but the idea is that there is a spectrum. Threats, absolutely. So I now want you, these are all great responses. So now what I'd like you to do is to think about the highest level behaviors. What are the highest level behaviors? Manipulation. Yep. Thank you, Bobby. Groping. Yep, absolutely. Sexual assault. Absolutely. Anything else? These are all very, very high level. So I want you to kind of think about all of these behaviors as a spectrum, because how you approach them or how safe it is to approach them may really be different depending on the context of the situation and also the level of the behavior. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, Pam. And you can actually just, yep, you can just let these out. So I just want you to see, you can let them all go, Pam, awesome. Okay, what I'd like you just to look at for a minute is that some of these low-level behaviors, the ones that are normalizing, the ones that we see all around us, are frequently around us. They're around us all the time. And the highest level behaviors are the ones that are least frequent, but are obviously the most intense. But what I'm inviting you to, and obviously the middle runs in the middle, and there can be some shifting from one level to another. But what I'm inviting you to think about is if we address those low-level behaviors, which are the most frequent and also the safest for us to address in some way and more directly, that probably will impact a shift in our culture, which hopefully will impact the frequency of our highest level behaviors. Okay, so I just want you to be thinking about the level of behavior and also the frequency of the behavior. Okay, really important. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. So this actually is where all of these behaviors came from, okay? And you'll see that the tolerance of the behaviors at the bottom supports and excuses those that are higher up. So to change the outcomes or the cultural makeup that supports or promotes a lot of these behaviors, really the thing to do, or the thing that would be easiest or most helpful for us to do, is to be able to challenge those normalizing behaviors. Okay, really, really important. And I just want you to also think about the fact that sometimes it can be difficult to identify those lower level behaviors because we're so used to them, just like Tracy made a reference to. So it's really important to think about how to be more aware so that we can notice those normalizing low-level behaviors. Okay, so go ahead. So this is just an illustration of a lot of what we're talking about.
Don't ignore the subtext. It's on us to intervene in sexual assault. Because we can. Take the pledge at itsonus.org.
So again, what I want you to be thinking about is that there really is a context for a lot of how we communicate things. There is a context. And I think that this is, looking at the text and subtext, really exposes a lot of the cultural expectations and also ways that we can challenge those expectations. Do you have any thoughts about that you'd like to share in the chat? Oh, I'm sorry. So I just was asking if there was anything that just came to mind after seeing this particular clip. It's scary to think that guys do that and don't think they're doing anything wrong. Absolutely. But we know that there's a shift that's not okay. And I just want you to be thinking about that. It's very disturbing. It actually is. It's very, very disturbing. So I also want to go ahead to the next slide, and I will continue looking. It's hard to call out friends, especially when you think they judge you, even though you know they did something wrong. Absolutely, absolutely. I want to be the person who's not intimidated by whatever pushback I might get by speaking out. Absolutely. So I just wanted to read you these two quotes that kind of spoke to me in terms of this subject. And one is from Haile Selassie. Throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, and the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most, that had made it impossible for evil to triumph. Oh, sorry, that made it possible for evil to triumph. My apologies. The world is a dangerous place, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it. Thank you, Albert Einstein. Okay, but again, I want you just to be thinking about how important it is to be able to navigate action. Okay, that's what we're talking about, to navigate action. Okay, let's go ahead. So I just want to talk a little bit about different kinds of interventions, because I think it's really important to understand that it's not all about confrontation, that it is about basically challenging in a way that could be safer to do. So being supportive to friends, choosing not to laugh, standing up on social media and challenging others. Okay, these are all things that are really important. It's about assessing safety and intervening accordingly, whether you're in a public setting or a private one with a friend who is signaling concerns. Be present and always believe them. Be willing to challenge behaviors that feel inappropriate or off to you. Be willing to challenge messages on social media and distract and disrupt as deemed appropriate. Most of all, trust yourself and remember to reflect on your personal barriers, your fears, and what might get in your own way. Really important, okay? But it can be something fairly subtle, even the body language signaling disapproval. Go ahead. So this particular graphic is something that I took from Bringing in the Bystander, which models a safety model, which I think is really, really important. And obviously, if you're alone and close up to a very concerning situation, it's going to be the least safe for you. If you're distant and you're with other people who you can keep safe or be safe with and collaborate with, obviously that's the safest. But most of all, remember that there's safety in numbers to allow for support and collaboration. Really, really important to think about. Okay, so I just wanted to talk for a second about bystander intervention programming, which encourages active bystander behaviors that would ideally seek to affect change in individual attitudes and beliefs, condoning violence. But it's really, really important that we think about how the perception of an individual's capacity can change, okay? I think it's really important to know that each of us can make a difference, and how individuals can support others who have been the victims of targets of violence. There are many great curriculum. There's Green Dot, Bringing in the Bystander, Holler Back, Step Up. There's many, many of them that are based on a lot of these concepts. In addition, what's really cool is that UNH created an app that's called USafe US, which is available in Nashua, that has an app that shares resources, but also strategies for people to get out of concerning situations. So it's definitely something to check out. The other thing that's really cool is that we should think about the fact that many of these bystander programs are research-based. They are effective in influencing values and willingness to intervene, and they really promote helping behaviors. And I think that this is really, really important to think about. Okay. So a lot of what happens in these programs, and you can keep it right here, Pam, that's okay. But a lot of what happens in these programs are really good pointers for us to be able to notice when there are issues that need to be addressed or challenged and ways to safely intervene. Okay, so just consider this. It's a lovely day and you're sitting by a river on your own. No one else is around. Suddenly you hear splashing and screaming for help. A person is caught in the current and drowning. You are the bystander. There is no mobile signal. You can swim. There is a life ring on the riverbank. What would you do? Please put in the chat what you would do. Throw the life ring. Thank you, Lori. I would go save the drowning person. Good job, Fermina. Yell for help in case someone else is out of sight to throw the ring, and throw the ring. But you would help that person because you would see that there was an emergency, right? You would intervene, but you would want to make sure that you are safe. And by calling out to see if others are around, that's a way too to make sure that if there are other people around, that could be a safety factor for you as well. Absolutely. Okay. So let's just quickly go ahead. I'm just going to talk to you really quickly about the 5 Ds, or the 4 Ds, I'm sorry. Great. And we're just going to talk about these really briefly, but these are the kinds of strategies that are often in a prevention program. So one of them is to distract. So you could go up to the person and actually pretend to be lost or ask them for the time, but basically somehow get in the way. That might be a safe way to get in the way. You could delegate by asking for help, maybe a storekeeper, a receptionist, get a friend on board, ask for specific directions. You could delay. So this would be something you do after the incident. You could ask, can I sit with you? Or what do you need? Or how can I help? Or check in, to be present and responsive and to share resources. And then the last intervention, which is kind of the most challenging, is to do something very, very directly. To say to them, you know what you're saying is not okay, or what you're saying is racist. Name the harassment, name the behavior, but most of all, remember that safety is crucial, and check into the person who's being targeted to be sure that you're doing what is going to feel the safest for them. The other thing that I just want to remind you of is that it's really important to stay calm and not to escalate, because if you are in a situation and if you escalate, probably the people that are around you will escalate as well. If you stay calm, or if you get calmer, chances are the escalation will be more manageable or won't escalate as much. Okay, really important. And this actually did happen, Tracy. I actually did this with a random dog a few weeks ago. Although he wasn't drowning, he was chasing a duck. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I wish you had pictures or a video of that. All right, so let's go ahead, okay? Let's go ahead. So these are just some crucial tips that I want you to think about. If you see something, intervene any way you safely can, all right? Trust your gut. If something looks like a bad situation and feels yucky, chances are it probably is. Be direct. Ask someone who looks as if they might need help, if they're okay. Enlist a friend. Remember that there is safety in numbers, so don't act alone if you have a choice not to do that. Create a distraction. Never blame the victim. Recognize potential danger. Talk openly and address concerning behavior to engage others. Set expectations by saying something like, this is not okay, or what you said is not okay. Believe and support survivors, and always enlist others to help you. Okay, these are really, really important things. Okay, so we're gonna really quickly, we don't have that much time, but we're gonna very quickly, let's go ahead to the next slide, Pam, and then the one after that. I'm gonna give you a couple of different scenarios, okay? And I just want you to think about them. Okay, so what would you do? So think about them. So the first is, so this is at school. A group starts making gestures and comments to another student. The student tries to ignore the comments but becomes very upset. An engaged bystander could tell the group to stop harassing the student or ask the student if they want to leave and tell a teacher or principal. What would you do and what would be safe to do? Why don't you put it in the chat? Absolutely. So you would delay the situation, right? Is there anyone that might challenge the group of students? I would say that I didn't appreciate the comments and leave the room. Absolutely. Go up to person being harassed and engage in conversation to take the attention away from the harassers. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else? These are all really, really good suggestions. Okay, I would say that the comments are not okay and ask the student to walk away with me. I would directly intervene. I can do that. I'm 58. Good for you, Suzanne. I'm older than you are. Okay, let's go to the next example. Thank you for your input. And I'm gonna see what you think. At work, someone overhears a supervisor say that they wish their partner had a butt like one of their employees. An engaged bystander could talk with the supervisor directly or report the incident based on the workplace's sexual harassment policy. What would you do? Put it in the chat. Both. Report the incident, absolutely. If these are younger students, I would think they see me as an authority figure and cut it out immediately, document it and contact HR, start a diary, report it, follow up with the manager and say it's not okay. Absolutely. Okay. So these are things too. This is sexual harassment. So these are things definitely to address. And those are all really, really great responses. Okay, let's look at the next one. It's about online. So there are comments posted in regard to a story about a sexual assault that imply that the victim deserved to get raped because of how they were dressed and how much they had to drink. An engaged bystander could respond to the comments by posting that it is never the survivor's fault if they are sexually assaulted and that the responsibility lies with the person who chose to commit sexual violence. So what would you do? What would you do? Okay, approach the supervisor. After posting the comment that it is never the survivor's fault, I would message the survivor directly to see if they were okay. I would explain how this is victim blaming and try to educate the person. Absolutely. I would post a comment saying that it's never the victim's fault. Absolutely. These are all really, really great responses. But again, these are things that probably happen, right? And I just want you to become aware of them or more thoughtful than you're pretty thoughtful, but to be aware of them. Okay, what about the next one at a party? Okay, and thank you, Suzanne, for your response. Ooh, my 14-year-old daughter called a boy out at school over a comment like this, and told him it was unacceptable, and she sent him resources to educate himself. Good for your 14-year-old daughter. That is awesome, Kelly. Thank you for sharing that. And yep, everyone thumbs up. Thank you, Tracy, for validating that comment of Kelly's and Suzanne's, everything, absolutely. So at a party, a friend starts flirting with somebody. The other person is not interested, but the friend will not leave them alone. An engaged bystander could approach the friend and start a conversation to distract them from the uninterested person. So what do you think? What are some of the things that, that you could do with this? What are some of the things you could do in this situation? Distract by saying, hey, want to go to get a snack with me or play a game in the other room? Absolutely. Introduce them to someone else to get them away from the person who's not interested. I would interrupt and say I would need to speak to the friend to get them out of the situation. All of these are awesome, awesome responses. So I just want you to just be thinking about these types of situations. I'm sure that they reflect some of the things that you've experienced. Press a distraction and see if you can help that person. Absolutely. So thank you very much. We actually are at 1 o'clock, but I just want, if everyone can bear with us, I just want to leave you with a few pieces of information. So remember that engaged bystanders assess their safety to intervene. Always trust your gut. If something seems or feels unsafe, it probably is. Stereotypes, victim blaming, and implicit messages are prevalent in our culture and impact behavior and violence. You can address relationship violence, sexual violence, and stalking by being open, calm, empathetic, and recognizing concerning behavior. And safe interventions and community resources are available through Bridges and our community partners. I just want you to also know that we will be following up with some resources, with some information on USAFE US, with a survey and also a certificate for attendance. And we'd love some feedback from you. Let's just go ahead so we can just review quickly Bridges services and ways that we can help you and ways that we help the community. So these are all the different things that we actually do at Bridges. We do have a 24-hour support line. And if anyone calls us, even at 4 in the morning, someone will get back to them within 10 minutes. Anyone can call and they do not have to be in crisis to call. But what we really can do a lot over the phone at night is give a lot of emotional support for people who are struggling in a relationship or with any kind of anxiety that has to do with their relationships. We have walk-in services in both of our offices, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. We are closed in Nashua, 12 to 12:30 every day but Wednesday when we're closed from 1 to 3. We have support groups. And what's very cool about our support groups is that they are gender inclusive. And we are actually, due to COVID, we are doing a lot of support groups virtually, which has been awesome. We have transitional housing programs as well as an emergency shelter that is in a non-disclosed location. And what's very cool is that now we have redesigned our emergency shelter so that we can actually have people in their own units rather than in communal living. We have educational programs. We support people at the emergency room and in the hospital, also at court, also at the CAC, also with police. Also, we work very closely with DCYF and the CAC. And we also now, in fact, this because of COVID-19, we actually have a chat feature that people can contact us through office hours through our website. We also use the language line and TTY so that we can communicate and be accessible to anyone. Okay, so I just want you to know that. The next slide, really quickly, is the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We actually will include this map when we send you resources, but there are 13 crisis centers in the state of New Hampshire, and these are, this just shows the different crisis centers and their catchment areas. And I know that we don't have much time for questions, but I will actually make sure that all of our contact information is available when we send you the follow-up information. Please join us, next slide please, for our next Lunch Connections, that's questions and next, which is going to be next, which is going to be, yep, on August 26th. So please join us for that. We'd love you to help us. Any feedback that you have, we would truly appreciate. Anything that we can do to make these sessions better. And then we do have a lot of different resources that are on this, this presentation, but we will be sending you a whole packet of resource information as a follow-up. So I don't think you need to worry too much about all of this. It will be something that you will get at a later date. And just before we end, I want to thank you very, very much for joining us today. I hope that we can be in contact and support you or your clients, anyone that is struggling or that needs our support. Thank you very, very much.